Hello everyone, welcome back to In the Shadows of Utopia. Still in Cambodia, still doing the research. As you know, if you're listening to this around the time that it has been released. Today I have a very special guest, another discussion with Henri Locard. Some of you will know that I released a sort of 2-hour, discussion is the best way to describe what that was, because it was very free flowing. It was two people just talking about things with little regard for what a listening audience who may or may not know what some of the things that were being spoken about were. So that's on Patreon. That again is for free on Patreon, the video of our discussion at the Royal University of Phnom Penh Library. Goes for about 2 hours. Like I said, in that video at the start, during the sort of opening credits, I say this is a tough listen, but you can access that completely for free on Patreon. You don't even have to become, a member of Patreon. You can just watch it. The link is in the description if you would like to, but as the video starts, you will be warned that this is, it's not an easy listen. Henri is not a spring chicken by any means. He still has a sharp mind, of course, but he's a little bit hard of hearing and getting on in years. So there is a tendency sometimes for him to just float with his answers a little bit, but this interview I'm releasing on the main channel, this is a much more structured interview. This is less of a discussion. I sent him the questions I was going to ask beforehand, and the recording starts, he's sort of already answering the last question that was supposed to be posed to him, but we sort of come full circle, don't worry about that. But the thing I wanted to mention was that while the somewhat rambling conversation we had in the library had much better acoustics, this was recorded on, the rooftop of a third-story apartment block in the middle of Phnom Penh. So it almost sounds like someone has a Phnom Penh soundboard and will randomly play sounds of Phnom Penh in the background at various parts throughout this interview. At one point there's a child screaming, at one point there's a car honking, there's construction noises, there's birds in the background, various sounds that if you've lived in Phnom Penh before you'll be familiar with. But perhaps for people with kind of a sensitivity to background noise like that, apologies. This is a slice of Phnom Penh that I hope doesn't diminish the interview itself too much, but listening back to it, I certainly found myself distracted by some of the background noise as and when it occurred sometimes. So just bear that in mind. If you thought the last discussion might have been hard to listen to just because of the discussion itself, this one might be hard to listen to because of some of the background noise that I'm afraid is out of my control, and my audio engineering skills, I'm not even sure if the best audio engineer could quite get rid of exactly what was there. So you just have to kind of accept that is the case. We're essentially recording in a public setting, and it was not the ideal location for audio. Now, I'll be upfront here and say that the 4 questions I ask, I start with what the slogan of the Khmer Rouge, a very prominent slogan they used, was the super great leap forward. I posed that slogan to Henri and ask him to expand on it. The second question that we eventually get to, with some tangents being taken in between, is about the influence of Angkorian myth on Khmer Rouge policies, which was outlined in an article he wrote that was part of a compilation of articles that were released by the Center for Khmer Studies. So there he kind of challenges some pretty standard ideas about the Khmer Rouge and Angkor that I would say are his, that he has strong opinions about. I wouldn't say that I necessarily agree with everything he said, especially about the sort of new research that has come out about Angkor using LiDAR and things like that. But again, that's part of Henri's thing. He has very strong opinions about some things, but unlike some figures in the general study of the Khmer Rouge, he doesn't challenge ideas in a way that diminishes the crimes of the Khmer Rouge. If anything, his ideas and opinions make the Khmer Rouge even more brutal than the standard story that many of you may have already sort of through osmosis generally have accepted about what the Khmer Rouge regime was. So Henri will challenge your view of what the Khmer Rouge regime was in a way that makes them even worse, if that was even possible. Which leads to the third question, which is his speciality. It's something that he'll reference quite a lot. He'll say his book that has not been published yet. This has been his focus of study for, I think, at least 20 years, which is the detention center system of Democratic Kampuchea, and crucially, prior to the official, start of the regime in 1975, his look at the provincial prison system, which he has written a book about, which that's been his focus for a very long time. That was what I set him up for with the third question, and he really expands on this idea in great depth at that point. So that's a wealth of knowledge for someone who's intimately connected with Cambodia. If you listen to the other interview that I released, you'll know that he was here in the 60s and for the last 15 years has been a lecturer at the Royal University of Phnom Penh. So this is someone with a very intimate connection with the Cambodian people. He can speak Khmer, and he's very worth listening to on some of these topics in particular. And when he challenges these ideas that have become the sort of standard understanding of the Khmer Rouge regime, I think they're very compelling. Now, the final question I asked is what book or which historian has made the most impact on our understanding of the Khmer Rouge. And this is where he sort of addresses, we just started chatting and he started addressing that question straight away, and I was like, okay, let's just start recording now. So he sort of starts with addressing that, and then at the very end we return to that question, but in fairly typical Henri fashion, he takes it in a direction that I didn't realize was going to happen, and some more fascinating insights about the prison system come out of even that discussion. So here is my interview, rather than discussion, with Henri Locard. Again, if you want to listen to that prior discussion that runs for about 2 hours, that is on Patreon. Again, the link is in the description. You do not need to sign up or do anything. You can literally just click that link and watch it right there. So that's there if you want even more Henri Locard. But this discussion is a little bit more structured, as much as I could try. And I hope you got a lot out of it, because I've certainly learned a lot from him, to the extent that I'll have to rewrite sections of my book that I've already written to include some of his insights, which are, as I said, really challenge some of the most basic understandings that we have of the Khmer Rouge. So, I give you Mr. Henri Locard. And we're on our way. Okay. So
Right, I can start.
you can start.
So when I first met David Chandler, that was in, wow, that's for you. That was for in Paris, and he was at that time working on his biography of Pol Pot, and Pol Pot was still alive in Anong Veng, and of course I asked the obvious question. Have you been able to interview him? And he didn't say heavens forbid, but he said with horror, interviewing Pol Pot, no, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
Which I think is completely mistaken, because Philip Short's book is much more interesting. No, it's different. Different.
Yeah, I find
It's different, but it's really to the point for two reasons. One, is a good writer. He's a writer.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's very important. And two, he did a lot of field work and went through the whole along the Thai border, interviewed the Khmer Rouge still in existence, and he picked up Phi Phuon. He selected Phi Phuon. Phi Phuon was the most interesting person because he lived from the very beginning of the movement to its very end, and was willing to speak. And because of his education, or rather lack of education, and total lack of sophistication, he was completely natural.
He just laid it all out.
So it just all came out. So
Well,
that made it very interesting. And and David Chandler
Yeah.
is a man of archives, a traditional historian.
Yes. Well, it
And,
comes across in his writing as well, which I find the more and more I read Brother Number One, the more and more I do come to appreciate how well he's able to concisely write. Like, very elegant, but concise and to the point.
Yeah.
Whereas, as you say, Short's writing is much more, it's flowery, it's full of description and things like that. But
I'm told, and he's too concise too. He tends, particularly his biography of Pol Pot.
it's quite short.
He's too concise.
Yeah. Well, and I guess
everything
he was
is right. It's a
writing
bit
it
too
at a
concise.
time that
And I was told that
there
his
wasn't much out.
excellent writing he's been very much influenced and aided by his wife. I don't know if this is true. Well,
right.
that's what I heard.
Well, behind every great man is a
There
great woman.
There is somebody. No, depending,
Yeah.
Some wives have nothing to do with the work. My
Yeah.
wife, not in the least interested in my research. She's a medical doctor, pediatrician, not in the least interested.
Yeah.
So
and
some
I know
people
that
are completely different.
so someone like Ben Kiernan's partner at the time was
yeah.
a great help to
She did the job.
Chantabua
She was
doing
essential.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Absolutely essential.
that's a through line there as well. But for people just listening, I'm back with Henri Locard. This time we're not in a library anymore. We are on a beautifully adorned rooftop in Phnom Penh, just near the Olympic Stadium, not too far from Tuol Sleng. What suburb is this?
What
What suburb is this?
suburb? It's just the Olympic Stadium.
Not quite Bong Trabai.
No,
No.
Pamukama is much to
It's
the
just sort
south.
of to the south.
We are
okay.
halfway between Tuol Sleng and the Olympic
in the
Stadium.
Olympic Stadium.
So I can go to Tuol Sleng easily
And we've
and
got...
see the director. And so, did you meet these two guys?
Yes. I met Hang Nisai, and then I met him at Tuol Sleng finally, and then I had the evening with the Australian ambassador, and when I checked in at the residence that evening, I noticed the name above mine, who just signed in, was Hang Nesai.
Uh-huh.
So I had just met him a couple of days prior, and the ambassador had invited him as a means of sort of connecting us, but we already knew each other.
I still have not been able to convince them that there is not just S21 in Cambodia.
Yes.
They have nothing in the museum about it, nothing at all. And they never made an exhibition or interested in making an exhibition on the provincial prisons.
Well, I think now with M13,
but one day perhaps I might convince them, but I don't know.
I think with M13 now becoming a prominent part of the heritage listing sites, I think they will start pushing at least M13. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here, because people that listened to the last discussion we had will know that was two sort of, Cambodia heads kind of just having a chat. This is going to be a slightly more, how would you say, traditional interview. Well, I've got a few questions for Henri, and we're going to get a few answers. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, the first question I had for you was, I remember reading your book for the first time, Pol Pot's Little Red Book. And the phrase that most stuck out for me of all of the phrases and slogans that you painstakingly collected and produced in this fantastic book was the super great leap forward, or the sometimes translated as prodigious great leap forward. What is it in Khmer? Do you remember? That's it. Now, for me, that phrase has been able to, it's almost a shortcut in explaining so much of the Khmer Rouge regime and their policies. Why don't you explain to the listeners what exactly was the super great leap forward, and why was it such a popular and well-used slogan during the Khmer Rouge regime?
Well, none of these slogans were popular. They were repeated by the officials, by the Khmer Pibal and the Yotir, but I'm sure they were not particularly popular among the
probably
population.
The wrong phrase there,
They were repeated and repeated. Yes. They had to listen to it.
Yes.
Why? Because we were in the middle or towards the end of the Cultural Revolution, and it's the last years of Pol Pot, of Mao Zedong, sorry. The death of Mao Zedong, not the death of the Khmer Rouge regime, because immediately after it's in Phi Phuon's life story, because he went in the autumn 1976 on a secret visit. That was not an official visit, but a secret visit. And Deng Xiaoping told him, don't worry, we're going to help you as much as before. There's going to be no change. But there was, of course, a change. And they, when the Khmer Rouge besieged them to send some troops in 1978, and there was a big, I forgot the name, but there was a big leader, Chinese leader, came to Phnom Penh and said, we give you as many arms or weapons or tanks or aircraft as you wish, but no men. We don't want to repeat the Korean War.
It's almost like what the Americans said to the Lon Nol regime.
Yeah.
We'll give you all the money and the arms you want, but no troops.
Yeah, no troops in the end, yes.
Sorry, and Mao's death was in 76 or 77?
76, the death in 76.
76. Because that's also when Pol Pot
76.
sort of, he announces himself in this eulogy for Mao, and he announces that Democratic Kampuchea is a country led by a Marxist-Leninist organization that he was the leader of. So it does mark this, yes, it certainly has this you think it's kind of a hinge point in the Khmer Rouge regime is Mao's death. But how does that relate to this phrase, the super great leap forward?
Because it was in China it was called the Cultural Revolution, and it meant that they would follow the Cultural Revolution, but even one step further, and make it more. For instance, collectivization. Everything in business was collectivized, but not your own private property. And in the Khmer Rouge collectivized absolutely everything. You just had two shirts and two trousers, one toothbrush, one cap, but that was your private property was finished to that. So it's a great leap forward in comparison to China.
And I believe it's in Philip Short's book that he mentions, so Pol Pot has this meeting with Mao before he dies.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit indecisive on whether Mao seems both to encourage and to give the Khmer Rouge warning.
Well, I'm not sure about Pol Pot, but it's certainly about Chou En-lai. It's Chou En-lai who said yes. Chou En-lai was a curious individual because he was extremely aristocratic, extremely well-mannered, from a very cultured and rich family. He was not proletarian in the least, and that's why Sihanouk loved him so much, because he was the ideal flatterer, and he brought Sihanouk into the movement completely after Ban Lung. It was completely won over by Chou En-lai. So Chou En-lai, when he was lying in bed and for 6 months, dying of a cancer that was not treated properly because Mao wanted him to die apparently. And it's in these last months, and I think Sihanouk met him, and he warned him against, going too far. But I don't think Mao Zedong ever did that.
Yeah, from my understanding, he seemed to say, "Oh, you guys are really taking it to where you're taking it beyond where we stopped." And he saw. The impression I got was that he encouraged
I don't know, you have
the
to
regime.
check that with Philip Short.
Yeah, I'd have to find
it must be
Chou
En-lai and not
He seems to
Mao.
balance both and say that okay, you guys are really going to go for it, and we held back, and you guys are going to try and make
For instance,
what our attempt was.
If you look at money, the work that this guy was doing on barter and money. In some ways, Mao Zedong also abolished money in the people's communes. In some people, and then they had tickets or vouchers or whatever instead. But they never abolished money altogether.
Yeah.
Similarly, people's communes. He created the people's communes and the model people communes, and the creator, what was his name? He came to Phnom Penh, and he said, and it's in my book, it said, "You realize in 3 years what I have not been able to do in 30 years. So this is the super great leap forward.
Yeah.
But not the whole country was made of people's communes.
No.
They had not, and they sent many people, hundreds of thousands, even millions into the countryside, but not all the cities. So this is a super great leap forward.
So you're referring to in China, they didn't collectivize everything.
They did not collectivize everything, and they did not put everybody in people's communes.
Yeah. How do you reflect then on the super great leap forward being a phrase that I feel that the Khmer Rouge leadership they felt like they were being patronized by the Vietnamese in particular. They were always, even the naming of their party, but we're the Khmer Workers' Party now, or now we're the Communist Party of Cambodia. We're the same as the Vietnamese, and you guys can't look down on us. And do you think that the super great leap forward is also an expression of their self-confidence?
Yes, we are doing it our own way.
Yeah.
We will not just follow you.
Yeah.
We do better than you.
Yeah, we'll do better than everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
better than everybody.
Yeah.
We're going to be the big model for the whole world.
Yeah.
I mean, they got completely crazy.
Yeah.
And went from my again from the last book I was reading is the sub-director of the National Bank, you know, who was a Kongchalat at that time, and they boasted that they went to was it to India to a big conference and lectured. It was Kisampon and Ing Sari.
Yep.
They were the big guests for this meeting of the Banlung Association, you know, the
Like
non-commercial
another
alliance.
Banlong, but we
And-
should explain what Banlong is for the listeners. This was like a
Bandung.
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 This was a conference in
Ba-
Indonesia.
In
Early 60s?
1955.
55, yeah.
1955.
Which sort
And
of-
that's when completely Sihanouk changed.
Yeah, it
Completely.
establishes this idea that you don't need to
You
be
must be
on
neutral.
this side or that
the
side
other
of the
side,
Cold War.
we're going to be independent. We're going to be neither west nor east. We're
Yeah.
going to be free.
Yeah.
And anyway,
So later, there's a similar kind of conference during Democratic Kampuchea.
yeah.
Yeah, with Ing Sari,
And these young men, I go back to Dr. Sunisit, you know, his autobiography. They boasted that the Kisampon and Yang Sari were the guests and presided over the ceremony, you know, in India, the big meeting of the Bandung Alliance in India. And they said, what idiots and what fools! How could the world be so stupid to invite these ignorant people who know nothing, who are the most stupid politicians on the earth, how they dare to lecture the whole world.
And this was during the regime or after?
Yeah, during the
So
regime.
people had
And
an
they were
idea.
the youngsters
Yeah.
who were just 18 and 19 years old.
Wow. That's, well, just to
Who,
get...
there were nobody in the country
Yeah.
were fooled by their principles, by their theories.
Yeah. Yeah.
By
But they
the
themselves-
regime, they detested, they all detested the regime.
Yeah. But they themselves believed they had this confidence.
Yeah.
That they were, going to outdo... It would be the greatest
were
socialist revolution that
completely,
had ever happened.
Out of reality,
Yeah.
living in a wishful world.
I often use the phrase unreality.
Yes,
It's the
total
it's the only way
unreality,
to
yes.
explain the world they were living in. I did have a chance to speak to an ex-Khmer Rouge doctor a few weeks ago now, and he certainly remembered the phrase "super great leap forward" being repeated quite a lot.
All the time.
He was interesting. I'm not sure if we talked about this last time, but he was a doctor in Krache. So he joined the Marquis after Sihanouk's appeal to the people. He met a teacher that he hadn't seen since 1967, who'd gone underground, Comrade Yam, who actually ended up being the ambassador to North Korea. So quite a high up figure, and I think this who I have to keep anonymous. We call him Uncle Doctor Number One. He would have had it, if we're talking in terms of patronage strings and things like that. He would have had a strong sort of connection to this quite respected leader in the Khmer Rouge. As early as 1967, I think he was head of the Krache district. But interestingly, he said, I joined the revolution because of Sihanouk, but I believed in democracy throughout the regime. I was never a communist, but I knew that if they knew that I wasn't a communist, that they would kill me. And then I said, okay, so if you realize that they would have killed you for your political beliefs, he was unable to then express that same conviction that killings were happening anywhere else. He was unwilling to accept the idea that widespread killings were taking place across the country. He said Kratcher, every time he visited, was totally fine until Tarmok ruined everything. He blamed everything on Tarmok. But it was this, it's this unreality. It's this cognitive dissonance of him knowing that he would have been killed for his beliefs, for not being a communist, and yet he wouldn't accept the idea that perhaps hundreds of thousands, perhaps up to, 1 million direct executions, perhaps 1 million more people dying just as a result of the policies of Khmer Rouge. He was unable to accept that. But, okay, moving on. Question number 2, which I have... No, that is it. I remember now. About a year ago, I read a essay that you'd put together as part of a compilation of essays. I forget the exact title. It was something like Khmer Rouge and the Myth of Angkor, or something like that.
That's just an article.
Yeah.
This is an article that was published in the Center for Khmer Studies.
Right. Okay.
A magazine.
Would you mind? Because I think there's a lot of, as you said, just before we started recording, you said one of the biggest misconceptions about the Khmer Rouge is that it started in 1975. I think another misconception, or perhaps not a misconception, but something that has come into common thought about the regime, is that they were trying to emulate the Angkorian Empire. 3 tons of rice per hectare, irrigation systems, things like that. And you get into this in quite a lot of depth in this article, and I found it very interesting that you how you explored that.
Yes, in that way, they did not follow the Chinese, the Maoists, who every antiquity was to be destroyed.
Especially during the Cultural Revolution, yes.
Whatsoever.
Yes.
The Khmer Rouge were so proud of their Angkor temples. That's what I explained in Angkor. First, they did not evacuate the population straight away because they were making a 3-day victory celebration in Angkor with Buddhist monks from the Republican side and from the Khmer Rouge side. And this big ceremony lasted 3 days, which is a lot. With plays, with songs, with of course slogans, speeches.
And just to be clear, this is April 20th, 1975.
That's right.
Yeah. So while people are marching out into the countryside in their millions...
No, it's 1975, that's right.
Yeah.
But
at Angkor...
The people in Siem Reap, they were asked to stay put.
Wow.
First thing.
Yep.
The second thing, all the people of the conservation. Conservation is a pivot, of looking after the temples, which were about 100 people plus their families, hundreds and hundreds of people.
Foreigners as well, or just Khmer?
They said, you stay put.
Yep.
You stay because they were living in the center of Phnom Penh, along the river, in a certain area. You stay put. And 3 or 4 days later, they were taken by lorries, by bus, to small villages in Bakong district, just east of Siem Reap. And they were given good food throughout the country. There was a hospital, because all the hospitals' beds were put in that area. Mm-hmm. They had plenty of food. None of them were arrested. Mm-hmm. None of them died. None of them were killed. The third thing, at the end of the regime, they had negotiations with the Thais, and the Thais they were having diplomatic relations, and they arranged for people to come and visit Angkor Wat, in the day, by air. So they cleaned all the temples, they cleaned the city, they closed the prison, They made young people, because all of the Conchela, the young people were cleaning everything, cleaning the temples to prepare for the coming of tourists.
Yeah, it's
And
something
the-
that
and the-
Elizabeth
and
Becker mentioned.
It was the fall of the regime, so it didn't start.
Yeah,
Right.
that they were thinking about like we need to
And
get
the
the tourism
the
back.
following regime,
Yeah.
and I was in 1989, 10 years later, and I visited Angkor, and I was alone. From 1979 to 1989, the completely idiotic PRK regime never thought of
Conservation
using the
and-
source of finance
and tourism.
of Angkor and having tourists in Angkor.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
And so that the Khmer Rouge did exactly the opposite of their model China.
And do you think that
All
that
the
they were
antiquities,
literally
that's
trying
how
to copy?
I've got some very good paintings,
Yeah.
which I bought in China in 1966.
Yeah.
And I had a Chinese, and they are in my house in the Alps. And there's a Chinese lady who was one of the tenants who came,
Yeah.
and she looked at my paintings and said, "Oh, but they are beautiful.
Yeah.
How did you get those?
Those are
They're
the
very
ones that were
valuable."
hidden away
Because
during the
they were selling everything, because if at that time
they're called
the
the
party
the Red Guard
saw
and
the Red Guard or
students,
whatever
yeah.
saw beautiful things in your house, it means you are not proletarian, you are bourgeois, you are a dangerous individual. Then you could be sent to the countryside or to re-education camps, because the Chinese, they sent to the countryside to re-education camps, and in their re-education camps, some were killed, but the majority were not killed.
re-educated. They
Re-educated.
really were re-educated.
But
yes.
in Cambodia, no time for re-education.
No. I visited the high school that I suppose isn't too far
So
from
they had
here.
a very-
Bong Trabai High School, where they had a re-education
all the visitors,
camp, yeah.
all the important visitors, particularly in 78, 77, 78,
Yeah.
were taken to Angkor.
Yeah, like a
All of them.
Potemkin village
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of
And
version
taking
of
photographs
the
and
stuff.
so on.
With Tiong Prasit and those
That's
kinds
right.
of people.
Something that
Yeah. So that's an interesting contradiction, isn't it, between the super great leap forward and this. Some people use the phrase ultra Maoist. I believe. Are you
ultra-Maoist,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, in all other words,
but-
it's ultra-Maoist.
But in this,
except
in this
the
sense,
arts.
except for Angkor.
And it's one of the most greatest characteristic of the Khmer. They are artistic. This man who just like, he's making beautiful things all the time.
So, do you think that this myth of Angkor, because this also extends to this idea of, like the flag of democratic Kampuchea has everyone
on
knows
the
the
flag.
red and the yellow
Yeah,
flag.
we
but there
can
was
build
also
Angkor,
the
we can do
symbol.
everything.
Yeah.
That was a very important slogan.
Yeah. But the other sort of symbol of the regime, I'm not sure it was like their emblem, I suppose you'd say, has this, I think you use it in the article, it has this a factory and an irrigation
Yeah.
sort of farmland systems within this emblem. Which points again to, I think, another misconception that people have about the regime is that they wanted to live in the Stone Age.
No, I think they had a misconception about the irrigation in Angkor times.
Yeah.
And this is due to, what's his name? The last,
Not Grosselier?
the Frenchman,
Yeah.
the last...
The hydraulic city idea.
Yeah, the hydraulic city, that's
Yeah.
right. It's completely a misconception. It was his father, Father Pochot, who gave me the book of an agriculturalist. And this never existed. It's a myth. It's never been a reality. Angkor and the area of Angkor, there was water management for domestic use and for religious use, but not for having 2 or 3 harvests for irrigation.
Really?
For two reasons, it's impossible for 2 reasons. The first one, it doesn't rain enough. Half of the year you have not a drop of water. 2, the slope from Phnom Kulen is a hill, but at the bottom of Phnom Kulen, between the bottom of Phnom Kulen and the Great Lake, the slope is very, very, very gentle, almost
Minimal.
no slope.
Yep.
And therefore, the water goes inside the land, doesn't flow. It's impossible, it doesn't flow.
See, this seems to contradict.
So it's a complete misunderstanding
Yeah.
by what's his name?
Was it Grosselier?
What?
Grosselier? Philippe Grosselier? Grosselier? My French is terrible.
Philippe Grolier. Philippe Grolier
Grolier.
was the father, but his son, Bernard Philippe Grolier, whom I knew.
Right.
It's Bernard Philippe Grolier who invented
He popularized this idea.
popularized the myth of the
Of this idea of like
city.
almost like a Venetian.
That's right.
kind of
And the
canal
Khmer Rouge
system and
wanted to
things like that.
reproduce that, but it never existed. They tried to reproduce something that had, and they made, and these young men, the Kongchalat, who were doing the water management system during the dry season.
So what would
they
this
wanted?
Conchalat, what does that mean?
Kongchalat is youth brigade,
Oh, right.
forward youth brigade,
Right.
from adolescence to wedding.
Yep.
And sometimes you could be up to 40, because when they disrobed the monks, they were joined with the Kongchalat. It's until marriage.
Right, okay.
A marriage is compulsory for everybody anyway.
Yeah.
And arranged marriage and forced
Yeah.
marriages. Right. But during all these years, you are Kongchalat. And during the dry season, you were creating this myth, which you see in the symbol of the country, and to be able to work out how many tons of rice you could produce on 1 hectare, you had to make every field 1 hectare. Maromek, 100 meter, 100 meter, 100 meter, 100 meter. But the soil in Cambodia is never completely flat. So if you do that, the water has a tendency to go on one half of the...
It's always shifting.
And the rest is dry.
Yeah.
It's completely absurd.
Okay.
So you had to take, to make sure that the thing is completely flat. But nowhere in Cambodia it's completely flat.
Yeah.
There's very, very slight slopes. And the what you call it, the little separation between the fields.
Oh, the dikes.
The what?
Dikes,
The dikes, that's
yeah.
right. The dikes, they followed the land.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't impose.
You
couldn't
cannot
impose this onto the land.
The land to be flat like this.
I'm just
This
wondering,
terrace.
because I feel like recent research by the late Damien Evans, he was sort of bringing back this idea of Angkor as this great, maybe perhaps 750,000 people, 1 million people. I thought he was kind of bringing back this idea that there were vast canals and people getting across.
When you say there were 1 million people living in Angkor, it's absolutely impossible. But if you say there were 1 million people living in the western side of the Siem Reap Lake, where the land, because it's near Bantiam Minche and Battambang, that the soil is very rich.
Yes, I was just
Not
in
in-
Sam Laut the
Not
other day.
in Siem Reap.
I made a
in
very big
or in
point
Kampong
of,
Thom. It's very poor soil.
yeah,
And you cannot grow 3 crops on that soil at all.
yeah, okay.
Because the soil has to be rich. And there were 3 crops under Angkor.
Yep.
The first one is on the normal field, on the way to Phnom Kulen.
Yep.
And you've been to Phnom Kulen, I'm sure you see the soil very poor,
Yep.
very sandy or
Just not
hard,
yeah.
not rich and soft. Now, so you have 1 crop there. The other crop is around closer to the lake, where it's more humid. Then you can have another crop, and the lake diminishes by 2/3, and the land abandoned by the lake still remains wet
And
for
silty and
so you have
good stuff.
a third kind of rice. So you could have 3 types of rice, but not on the same piece of land.
Right. Okay.
Physically it's impossible,
Okay.
because they're over the lake, They send all the rice from Battambang and Banteminjay to Siem Reap to feed hundreds of thousands of people.
I guess before we move on to just on this same topic, I suppose I have one extra question, which is, but you're not, your contention isn't that the Khmer Rouge wanted to be like the Khmer Empire, but that they had certain ideas of how the Khmer Empire the Angkorian Empire had functioned, and
they
were
were
trying to
overwhelmed
emulate some
by
of these things.
and it's the French who imprinted
Gave
that
them
idea
this.
in their brain.
Yeah.
Because when the French arrived, there had been such, for centuries, a break between Angkor period and the modern period that they thought that it was another race, another people who'd been the not their ancestors, but another race or whatever. And two, that they were 2,000 years old, not 1,000. They are exactly contemporary to our cathedrals.
Yeah,
11th, 12th, 13th century. They're exactly the same centuries. While we were building our cathedrals in Europe, they were building their temples in Angkor.
Yeah.
But of course, the technology of our cathedrals is infinitely better, because we know that you don't put one block against one block, above one block, they just fall down. You put them on quinconce, I don't know how you say, you put one here, and the other one in the middle, the next one in the middle.
Yeah, I think
And they don't know how to do an arch.
Yeah, there's
Imagine,
no arches at Angkor.
Arches were done before
Yeah.
Jesus Christ in the Middle East.
Yeah,
But in Cambodia, they didn't know how to make an arch.
couldn't figure the arch.
And
Well, didn't
you know,
Henri
for-
Locard, in his
one
book,
day-
he said it was, he
What?
thought, Henri Locard, didn't he think, I feel like in his travels in Cambodia, he presumed that, yes, it was like contemporary to sort of Roman times that these temples must have been built.
They thought that it was
from
2,000 years
from
old.
the earliest times,
And it's Sisavat, Norodom Yukantor, it's called Norodom Yukantor, the young man who went to Paris, he was about in his early 20s, to protest against the protectorate, because the protectorate, when they signed, well, Angdung and Norodom signed with France, it was to establish borders. We talked about the borders, I think, already.
Yes, borders are always
We established
concern
borders.
for basically
But you don't
every
govern.
Cambodian
You don't govern
government.
us. We
Yeah.
don't need to be governed.
Yeah.
We just need borders
Yeah.
to be protected from our neighbours.
No, this was when France was
And
becoming.
he said,
this is
perhaps
more
I
of a
already
colony
said that.
rather than
And
a protectorate.
you cannot teach us anything, because our culture, history is much older than yours. Our culture is older than European culture. So they are so ignorant about of European culture, and completely ignorant about their own culture.
Okay. Well, let's move.
And
to
they
my,
could not read the stone inscriptions.
The Pali,
Imagine,
yeah.
it's in Pali and in Sanskrit.
Yeah.
But it's and the script is almost the same as contemporary scripts.
Yeah.
It's very similar.
But they just
Imagine.
lost touch.
Nobody in 1863, when we were, nobody in Cambodia could decipher the stone inscriptions.
But they were still making the occasional royal pilgrimage. Like there was still this connection with Angkor.
Angkor Wat, it's the only one that was still in use, and it was turned into a Buddhist temple. Only Angkor Wat was a little bit looked after.
Yeah, I'm
And
just
a place
I
of
don't want people
a
to
place
get
of
the impression
pilgrimage.
of
But that's all.
this idea that it was a lost civilization which was popularized sometimes by the French, but I think is another misconception that people have, which isn't what you or I are saying. But my next question is about your specialty, I suppose. So over the last couple of weeks, I visited Krang Tachan, which was Tarmok's prison in Kandal, so the southwest zone. It was in operation from, I believe, 1971 or 1972 onwards.
That's right.
And I've also recently visited M13 in Am Liang, so it's sort of just on the border of Kampong Spo and Kampong Chenang, which was Doik's prison, set up in... Yeah, I've been told this has been...
Never mind.
No, it's something that it came up at dinner the other night.
Yeah.
Where I was corrected on saying Doik, and then it was Deutsch, and then I sort of brought up, but there are other people like Hinton, Yuk Chang, they say Doik. Now I used to say Deutsch, now I say Doik. I've been telling people to say Doik, and now I'm getting corrected again. So this is my formal apology to my listeners.
No, you just...
I may or may not have been saying Doik incorrectly.
It doesn't matter.
But
it's of
as
no
Henri
importance.
says,
it's of no importance.
It's of no importance.
But you can say both if you want.
So M13's in operation from about July 1971. Mm-hmm. So this comes to your point of the regime is once the Vietnamese have essentially conquered most of the countryside and given the administration of it to the Khmer Rouge as early as 1971, 1972, certainly by 1973, 80% of the countryside is under communist control. So these two security centres, I'm led to believe that perhaps 10,000 people died at Krang Thachan, perhaps most of them during the regime. I would accept that. But M13, perhaps a very high death toll, perhaps in the thousands, no one really knows. But this is before the April 17th, 1975. This is 3 to 4 years prior to that. So these are just two security centres. Mm-hmm. Now, I believe a lot of your work has been concentrated on the extent of this prison system and how, certainly if there was one in the southwest and there was one in Am Liang, obviously there would have been one in the northwest, in the north, in the east, in the southeast. So I guess I just kind of want to tee you up with that. Your work on the prison system generally, and get your opinion on just how vast this system was and how many people may have died in it prior to
All
the
right.
regime
Anyway,
starting.
it was larger than most people believe. Most people completely ignore it because we have pointed out we have this huge museum in Phnom Penh, and inside the museum they don't even tell you that it's just one of hundreds. Now, DCCAM came to the figure that was used at the tribunal of 196. I just finished this morning counting, and I come to 375.
375 prisons.
Which I could identify,
Security centres,
but it's
yeah.
impossible to count because what I'm told is that every people's commune had, for me, for definition of a prison, is a place where you're confined, one, and two, where you use iron kno,
Like shackles.
which is just a bar,
Yeah.
and the
It was in
rings
sort of,
that
sort of a
slide
row.
on the bars.
Yeah.
So you are tied with iron, and basically I am told that every people's commune had its place of temporary where they were first interrogated, and a lot of it, all this involved a lot of paperwork because every citizen had to write his autobiography. So they had every citizen of the people's communes, the leaders of the people's commune had an autobiography for every single citizen. One. Two, when they were arrested, they were interrogated again under duress also, and put in iron, for a number of days. So with these two the old autobiography plus the results of the interrogations, they were sent to the local prisons where everything was done again, more reports and confessions. I just found one place where an individual wrote himself. In Tuol Sleng, they wrote themselves, mostly. They had to write their autobiography. In the provincial prisons, nowhere except one example I found in one place to write. But so they didn't have, but that was an enormous amount of paperwork. Right, so it's virtually impossible because I don't know how many people's communes there were. Normally, the people's communes at the beginning were one commune. So we know that in each district there were between 5 and 12 communes in each district. And for each province, you had 6, 7, 8 districts. So you can multiply. So theoretically, we could have up to 5, 6, 700 prisons.
So this
I could identify only about half of them.
Yeah. We're still talking about a number double than what is
Yeah,
the
probably
official...
double what I can identify.
Yeah.
It's impossible to identify unless somebody tells me or knows or can find out how many people's communes there were. Because basically we can know that there was a place of detention in every people's communes, or temporary. Right. The other thing is there are no regional variations. Contrary to Benkian, people like Ben Kiernan repeat and repeat and repeat. And I've just been finishing with the East, Preveng, Swai Rieng, Kampot, Takeo. There were as many prisons in those provinces which were supposed to be under Vietnamese influence and therefore milder. There's nothing mild about them whatsoever. And they were just as cruel and criminal as the one in Battambang or Bantimintier or Siem Reap.
So this idea, I think a lot of people have this idea of, and popularized by film and books, of people disappearing in the night kind of thing. But this would, if we're following your contention here, that it may not be that someone just disappeared in the night and was taken away and killed, but they were taken to a prison and interrogated beforehand, which would actually, someone like Hang Yor's biography, that would comport with that idea. He was sent to a regional detention, re-education camp where he saw terrible things happen and was tortured but managed to survive. But it would certainly comport with this idea that you didn't just disappear in the night. You were subjected. You were, and I guess that ties into this whole idea of saboteurs and spies, and that you wouldn't just kill someone, you're killing them because they're a saboteur. And if they're a saboteur, they must have other people they're colluding with and conspiring with. So in that warped worldview, yes, you wouldn't just take someone away in the night and kill them. You would interrogate them, make them confess, find out who they're working with.
When people disappeared, the majority of the population believed they were killed straight away. Some were killed straight away, but the majority were taken to because before killing them, they must give their network, basically, as in Tuol Sleng. Right. Now, the other difference with Tuol Sleng is that, apart from one exception, they never wrote their own autobiographies themselves. Right. Now, the other thing which is very essential is that I believe that comparatively not all that many people died of starvation, less than what it is said, because you read people were stealing food all the time, or digging roots, or eating frogs, They were all very, very skinny, very weak, but they were not starved to death. And in other words, more people were killed deliberately than usually is assumed.
Because usually the number roughly given is about 2 million, and then based on someone like Craig Etchison's findings, perhaps 1 million were directly executed by the regime. The other million is considered starvation, overwork, illness. And you think it's a higher number?
Yeah, I think it's much higher killed than starvation. Now, go back to Wang Chan and Tam Quoc prison. I have, and that connects with Monash and David Chandler and your university. When I went...
My former university, but yes, I'm an alumni.
Oh, you're connected with it. All right.
They still send me emails asking me for money, but no, I have no formal connection at the moment.
Right. Anyway, when we had this big conference for when I think it was 1994, the end of the 90s. I forgot the exact date. When we had this big conference, it was on the history of democratic Cambodia in general. And I did my paper on Krang Chan because they were extremely important prison for me because it's the only provincial prison for which we have archives. They are very similar to the archives at Tuol Sleng, and therefore they're representative of all the archives that have disappeared, have been deliberately destroyed. So they count for these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of prisons. Now, my paper has not been published, and I hope you will help me to publish that paper.
Yes, one day we're going to get this paper
Yeah,
out there.
because now I'm in the process
in
of trying to find a publisher for my book on the provincial prisons.
Yes.
It has 3 parts. The first part is about 40, 50 pages on, well, the definition of genocide and not genocide, of course, this question of genocide.
Yes.
And, well, just it's a totalitarian regime. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I summarize what is the Khmer Rouge prison, what are the characteristics of the Khmer Rouge prison. Then I have province by province. It's a bit boring and it's very repetitive. All the prisons I've identified, and it's a series of testimonies, some short, some very long. I have many ex-victims of the prison system, and I have many Khmer Rouge also. So some of these, one possibility would be to make a selection and keep only the best testimonies, the most interesting testimonies. I have already got rid of the smaller ones. The thing were just 1 or 2
And sorry,
pieces
are
of
you saying these
information.
are documents you found or interviews you've made
interviewed
with
on the spot.
former inmates or locals that knew what was going on?
There are 3 kinds. There are former inmates of the prisons,
Yep.
former Khmer Rouge, or people living next to the Khmer.
Yeah.
And they saw
the
who was
locals
coming
always
in and the local population.
Yeah.
Right. Basically, there are 3. And many of these witnesses are extremely interesting. Right. Some of them perhaps less, of course. But some people say, well, just a series of... But the general picture I've got at the beginning of my book, and it's about 40 pages. Right. And at the end of my book, I have an analysis of about 30 pages of Krang Chan, all the archives, who were the victims, what was their age, why they were arrested, how they protested against the regime, and so on. Basically, they're the people who tried to run away to Vietnam, because we are not very far from Vietnam, or people, Kampuchea Khmer, who were badly treated in Vietnam, and they came and took refuge in Cambodia, and they were immediately sent to Krang Chan, the poor guys. So I think this paper is very interesting.
Yes.
And then at the end, I have a few notes about Phnom Penh.
Yep.
And even S21. Some people I interviewed S21. So I have a few things on Phnom Penh.
So, yeah, I've often thought about it based on your work and I guess others, but primarily your work that...
And the book is about 370 pages or something.
And it's not out yet, so people, keep a lookout. But I've always thought about it as sort of like a spider web, like a network of prisons. And I think there's a misconception that people have, like you said, that there was only one prison and it was Tuol Sleng, where only perhaps 10 or 15,000 people were killed. But Tuol Sleng was really for the most important. If you went through one of these regional centres, then perhaps it was determined that, well, maybe this person does know something or they're hiding something important, then they should be sent to S21. Or during the purges of the East Zone and places like that, if you weren't, you might have been killed at just some local high school if you were just a regular Khmer Rouge soldier that had been deemed too close to the Vietnamese. But people don't realise that the majority of the victims at Tuol Sleng were Khmer Rouge and their families.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And yes, what the problem that the difference is that Dutch claim that once they went through the gate of S21, he did not sentence them to death. They were already sentenced to death. Right now, this could be true. This could be not true. We don't know. Well, the other thing is, when I was just rereading some of the declaration of Dutch and at the second trial, and he said that no, we didn't have connection directly with the provincial prisons. I wanted Nek Petra to work on this subject, with a connection with the local, with the provincial prisons. We cannot, because we have to follow the hierarchy, and we are directly attached to the leadership, 870 office,
yeah.
And therefore we can only connect with it's if 870 tells us to go and pick up somebody in the countryside, we do it, but we don't take the initiative ourselves. I don't know. I don't know if it's true or not.
Trying to make himself as almost like a tool of just a function.
Yeah.
He performed a function rather than exercising.
But anyway, I was always understood that S21, contrary to all the provincial prisons, they could go and pick up any individual anywhere in the countryside. But this has never been analyzed, investigated. We don't know. From my interviews, and it's in my book, that person was sent to S21. So each time I wrote, when I have this, and I write to Petra or Nisai, I send them, do you find their names?
Henri's just
and they usually answer me, we don't find it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they have not been to S21, because the list of inmates is not complete. Some names have been lost.
Yeah.
Right.
But you've established a pattern that existed across the entire country, that challenges this regional variations thesis, and that really, I mean, it expands on this idea of just how brutal the regime was. It's quite compelling. You have to get this book out there.
I have one example from Kampong Som. There was a young worker in Kampong Som who was married to a much younger wife, who was at least 20 years younger, very young work. And one day, with a couple of friends, two other friends, they could not stand the regime. Even the people who were Khmer Rouge did not like the Khmer regime, by the way. They could not stand the regime.
Yeah.
So they took a boat to flee to Thailand.
Yep.
And Thailand by boat is very, very close, right? But they were caught on the way. They were arrested, and of course, it's regarded as high treason. And that guy was sent to Tuol Sleng. A few days later, the wife, whom she left. He left because they had no children, and it was not a very, very close partnership.
Also, so only the husband tried to escape.
And it meant
And he
that
left his wife.
he sentenced his wife to death. By doing that, you know, they usually, the partner is arrested and put to death.
Root and,
Right.
root
But
and
if you
branch.
don't take your wife, you sentence her to death.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the kind of guy he was.
Right.
And a few days later, she herself was arrested. And she said, but I did not know that my husband was going, I have no way. But she was taken, and she claims, to Tuol Sleng. And then in Tuol Sleng, after being interrogated and so on, she found herself out of Tuol Sleng, freed from Tuol Sleng, because one of the interrogators knew her husband or knew her. So I tried to, I asked, I found no trace of this man
is
whatsoever.
One of the very few.
And I
people-
interviewed, she
Yeah.
lives in Po district in Siem Reap. You could still, she was quite young, she was still a woman we can meet
Wow,
if you're
okay.
interested. Because I have never been able to really investigate that story.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, well, if you go to Tuol Sleng today, you get a very standard story of 7 survivors, and
And another
then
one
no
is,
one would ever
is
escape
Talao,
or-
number 2 in Nay Saran, that was for the Bo here, for the northeast region. Nay Saran was the leader,
yeah,
and he was one of those first one being purged.
yeah,
And his Talao, who was a Jarai, the uncle of Phi Phuon, was summoned to Phnom Penh, but we have no trace of him whatsoever in Tuol Sleng either. And we probably, these people who knew they were summoned to Phnom Penh, what it meant, so they, like Sao Pim, they committed suicide. So he committed suicide on the way. So there's no trace of him in Tuol Sleng either.
Niceran's confession
So what
is very
I've been
important. Yeah.
attempting to make relations between S21 and the provincial prisons,
Yeah.
I'm not in a position to.
Yeah.
I found nothing,
Yeah, so
basically.
I've described it sort of as like the central node, but that might not be quite the case. It might be that these. Are you saying that perhaps some of these provincial prisons they operated under certain guidelines,
The
and
power,
that they were sort of
the power,
separated from
the
some
line
other-
of power, the Xai,
Yeah.
the thread of power. Was it Tuol Sleng, 870,
Yeah.
the provinces?
Yeah.
Or was it Tuol Sleng directly to the provinces? I have no idea.
Okay. Interesting.
And that's these two young men, this is the kind of thing they should find out.
So, and this
And I cannot convince them.
Henri's referring to Mr. Hang Nisai and Mr. Pektra, the head
Sum Pektra,
archivist
yes.
of Tuol Sleng and the current director of Tuol Sleng. Okay, so my final question for you, Henri, which is actually where we started our discussion. So for the recording purposes, we'll sort of be making a full circle here. But my final question was, I guess however you'd like to interpret it, what is which historian or which book do you think has been able to best shape our understanding of the Khmer Rouge regime? Who's...
I think I told you already.
Yes, but now you'll have to repeat
it's
it.
Phi Phuon, The History of a Nightmare. Although
So Philip Short's, yeah, History of a Nightmare.
Philip
yeah.
Short, The History of a Nightmare, although he's just a journalist,
I think that might
journalist
have
of the
been-
BBC.
I think that might have been cut before we started recording.
Yeah.
So Philip Short is the man for you.
simply
Yeah.
because it's a highly readable and informative and sound. I had some discussions with him because of course he met me when he started his research, and I disagreed on a few points. He was right or I was right, so he changed, and he's published a book which is almost perfect.
Yeah, it's my recommendation for
while
anyone if they
Da-
get one book.
David
it should be that
Chanda,
book.
wrote, and it's quoted in my book, which is not yet published, that I want to publish, the difference between S21 and the provincial prisons is that in the provincial prisons there was no writing, there was no paperwork.
Well, I was just
It's exactly the opposite of the truth. There was a mass of paperwork, and Kantachan is the example. We know that, not just by hearsay, but to have the paper.
Well, so at M13, I was led to believe that they were doing the same thing. They were creating the confessions, but they were burned, and that we don't have any of the confessions.
That's right. They've
from
been
M13.
destroyed.
Yeah. So that may have been the practice pre-1975, was to just get the confession, but then...
No, they were. It's post 1979 that they were systematically destroyed.
Post 79.
79, yes. It's the Vietnamese who were destroyed. First, it was neglect. People, they had to survive. They were starving, so they had reunited with their family. The members of the family had disappeared. That was the priority. Find food and eat. And then go back to their homes and repair their homes. All right, this was the priority, not collecting these scattered documents. Right, one. So neglect. Or they use it just for paperwork to make a package. Right.
Yeah.
The second thing was that the people themselves, the Khmer Rouge themselves, and these are all the proofs of our crimes. So destroy them. Destroy the written evidence that we killed hundreds of thousands of people. And three, even the invading Vietnamese, I have evidence in some places, they themselves destroyed the people. And the last, of course, one of the last things, it's the job, the Vietnamese did the job, 100% of the job, which is understandable. I think this makes sense.
Well, I mean, and they did most of the job in 1970 and 1971 and 1972 as well.
From the beginning, yes. They created the Khmer Rouge.
Exactly.
And when I said, for the creation of the Khmer Rouge, there are two internal causes, two external causes. The internal causes are, of course, Angka. This group of 5 people, Pol Pot, Nguyen Chia, Khieu Samphan, Son Sen, and Ieng Sary. They are Angka. You need Angka, absolutely. One. Two, you need the king. If you didn't have the king, they would not follow you. So this is the internal causes. The external causes are, of course, the Viet Minh who created the Khmer Rouge in the first place, and then the Chinese who supplied all the weapons to the very end. And the policies also.
And the external forces
If
you're
you
talking about, they go
remove
back to the
one of these 4 causes,
40s.
if you remove one of those 4, if you don't have Sihanouk, you don't have the Khmer Rouge.
Yep.
If you don't have Angka, you don't have the Khmer Rouge. If you don't have the Viet Minh, you don't have the Khmer Rouge. If you don't have China, you don't have the Khmer Rouge.
Well, I think that is about as perfect an ending to an interview that I could think of. Henri, again, it has been a great pleasure speaking with you. If you haven't read Pol Pot's Little Red Book, find it. His newest book, Jungle
Heart of the Khmer Rouge.
Jungle Heart of the Khmer Rouge, which is a
In
sort
Latanakiri.
of biography of Phi Phuon, who was Pol Pot's sort of closest bodyguard for many years, and a wealth of information. Go out and get that book as well, if you can find a copy. But aside from that, Henri, thank you so much again for coming on the show.